So we're going to determine the period and amplitude. It says amplitude. I also want to do the period of these two graphs. So if you're doing sine and cosine, um, there's specific things you have to look for amplitude. So all sine and cosine graphs can be written in this form: a sine or cosine of bx plus or minus c. So the amplitude is always the absolute value of a. So that's how really far from the axis that the graph is going to get. And the period is, for sine and cosine, 2 pi over b. So the smaller the period, the more smushed the graph is going to be because it's going to take less time to complete a cycle. So it's easy to find these things. It's a little bit more difficult to understand them. So make sure you try to understand them. So let's talk about the period and amplitude first. So for A, the amplitude of this sine graph, A is a -2. So the amplitude is the absolute value of that, which is obviously just 2. So amplitude is always positive. So the amplitude of regular sine graph is 1. So this is going to be stretched out when you compare it. The period is 2 pi over b. In this case, b is 6. It's the number before the x, the coefficient of the x. So the period is pi over 3. So what that means is normally the sine has a period of 2 pi, so it takes that long to complete a cycle. If the period is now pi over 3, it's going to smush it a lot because here's where 2 pi is, and this is your normal sine graph. If this is saying this particular sine graph finishes it in pi over 3, which is somewhere, say, over here, then it's going to have to do this. So it's going to be smushed. So hopefully you understand that. Sometimes it takes a while to think about it. But let's go to the next one. The period of this the amplitude of this cosine graph, you do it just like the sine, is the absolute value of 4, which is 4. Now, the period is a little bit more complicated. You just have to be careful. It's a fraction. So we're going to just remember what our rules are when dividing by fractions. So period is still 2 pi over b. But here, b is 3 halves x. So the b is 3 halves, 3 over 2. When you divide fractions, you multiply the top, which is 2 pi, and you can think of it if you want over 1, times the reciprocal of the bottom. So it was 3 halves, now it's 2/3. So the period of this would be 2 pi times 2 over 1 times 3. So this, like the last one, since 4 pi over 3 is less than 2 pi, it's going to be smushed, but not as much as the one before it, because this one will take now 4 pi over 3 to complete a cycle. So, but this one compared to this one is going to be much more stretched out on the y because it has a larger amplitude. So that's it. That's how you find period and amplitude of a graph with a sine or cosine graph given its equation.